right, I'm ready.
All right.
Got it.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Will It Be a Classic, the show where we talk about movies from the last couple of years and speculate on how they'll be regarded in the next couple of years. Today's movie, we are talking about 2018's Hereditary, directed by Ari Aster. And I got my buddy, my friend, Tyler. How's it going, man? How you?
Dude, it's awesome, man, buddy. It's great to see you, man. Love this movie. I'm ready to get into it.
Hell yeah. So, this movie, before I even get into that, what was, I guess, like the first time like you saw this movie? What was kind of like that experience like?
So I waited. I didn't see it in theaters, unfortunately. I regret it. But I saw, obviously, they had a lot of talk about this movie. I heard some talk about saying that when they premiered it, there's therapists or like psychologists in the theater with them, ready for people who responded differently and shit. So that gave me a little bit of buzz for the movie. So I was like, okay, something's going on about this movie that's specific enough. So I ended up renting it, I think, when it came to like straight to streaming or whatever. And honestly, it hit me real crazy. It was one of those movies, it gives you a slow build up, but it doesn't hit the stereotypical things you see in most horror movies. So that's what kind of drew me in anyways. I was like, whoa, they're getting real specific with it. There's a long build up to everything. And I mean, not to jump straight into it and everything, but I love the demons. I love ghosts, everything like that in a movie that's a little different to draw you. The more realistic, it kind of gets me in there. Again, before I ever saw the movie, I heard there was a whole lot of psychology behind this movie. And
Hmm.
that's what really drew me in. That's what really drew me in, the psychology behind it.
Right. It's a I think what's awesome about Ari Aster, especially with Hereditary and the movie that he made the following year with MidSummer, is that they're very much uh, dramas that just have like horrific things happening within the plot, and so it's very natural. And so with Hereditary, it's so much of just a family drama.
Mhm.
Um, but this movie is super divisive. It's a you either love it or you hate it kind of movie. Um,
Yeah.
like there's like I follow like a ton of like horror pages and stuff on Facebook, and whenever someone makes a post about Hereditary, there is 230 comments all about either it is one of the best movies they've ever seen, it's one of the scariest, or this is like the shittiest, most boring thing ever, and Ari Aster shouldn't be a director. And it's insane how polarizing a movie could be. So I mean, like obviously, like I know that you like it, but do you know anyone that like hates this movie?
I mean, I wouldn't go as far as say it's hate, but I will say there's people who maybe don't have the attention span to
Mm.
wait and like maybe see all the nuance throughout the movie, or maybe the connecting factors, or maybe even after watching it, when they learn the connecting factors, it doesn't like excite them any more than they originally were. Because
Okay.
you see, I feel like there's a cadence that people certainly pick up on depending on what type of film lover you are, that maybe you can like a movie that has a slow buildup. And if you're actually really attentive to it, you can see all the slow things that don't make sense at that time, but you realize they focus in on it. Like, for one example in particular, when the brother is made to make his younger sister, Charlie, go to a party with him, obviously we know what ends up happening at the end. But
Mhm.
on the way there, they pass a specific pole, and that pole they focus in on and just sit there for a minute. Now, obviously, you don't know what's going to happen if you've never seen this movie before. But on the way to the movie, you sit there and you go, they focus on this for a reason. You know
Oh
what I'm
yeah,
saying?
it's very deliberate.
Yeah, and it's like those are one of the few things in the movie that maybe you do pick up on, but they actually set up so many things in the movie that maybe you might not even pick up on intentionally the first time. But
Hmm.
there's so many of them that are kind of foreshadowers that you're just like, more things are going to happen. And as me, even though it was a slow start to the movie, those few things kind of hooked me along to be like, I have to finish and see where this is going, type of thing.
Right. Um, So this movie was distributed by A24, which is
Mhm.
like, if you know what A24 is, it's like basically the number one art house kind of cinematic distribution out there right now. If if you hear that a movie is an A24 movie, you know exactly what you're getting. You're gonna get this really weird esoteric slow burn, um, which I have no problem with. But how, I guess, how familiar are you with like A24 films, especially in the last couple of years, as A24 has now become like pretty synonymous with the now, you know?
Honestly, when I think of A24, my initial thought is anxiety.
Really?
That is that is my initial thought. Every A24 film that I've watched, the whole movie, you were just nervous. You don't like whoever said be the main character or the several main characters that they might have in it. Every
Mhm.
single one of them is in a predicament where they're responding off like a natural response, as you say, if you're not familiar with whatever situation. And you, as the viewer of the film, know that it's going to lead them further in a darker path. And like it almost always does. So you just know. And like they set up the film, the cutscenes, the music, the vibe, everything. It's always like, things are going to get worse. And they're just responding. But at the same time, they're responding what seems like as a natural person may respond. So you can't hate them. You're not sitting there being like, what are they doing? They're just doing terrible things. You know what I'm saying? So they put it as a real realistic feeling,
Mhm.
but you as the watcher know it's going to get worse from there, and that's the point of the movie and everything. So every movie it seems that I watch from them, like I love them so much because it's so realistic that I get a different type of scared paranoia watching it
Yeah.
that
Oh
makes
yeah.
me sit there and watch like, what are you doing, what are you doing? Like, and it's just synonymous with them, like, and then regardless if it's a horror movie or just like a thriller, like, because they do a little bit of everything, but every single one leads me to the same conclusion of just like trauma. Like,
Oh yeah. I think trauma is definitely like a perfect word for it, especially with like the A24 horror films where a lot of them do deal with just very traumatic things, you know? Hereditary starts off with the grandmother of Tony Collette's character dying. Um and I think it's really interesting that this movie, like many others for A24, are movies that reward repeat viewings. Where if you watch it a couple of times, especially a slow burn like this, where everything is very like meticulous and deliberate, you kind of you pick up on so many different, like as you said earlier, like different like nuances and everything within the movie. I think that's really interesting. And so I I think I'll start off with the question being, do you personally think this movie is going to be regarded as a classic in say the next 10, 20 years? Or do you think this movie is going to be like kind of forgotten about?
you know I'll answer you with the two-parter. I'll say my personal wishes is that it will be regarded as a classic, and that it may get a cult following, like say so many others, like Evil Dead or
Mm,
other certain things like that, where there's a certain niche for people like that understand what it is. But honestly, how it was received and how I've passed it on to others, the slow burn, which how you described it, which I think perfectly describes it in a sense. I think a lot of people that might even try to watch it or so may not actually finish it all the way. So I think it might be a gem I think eventually it may be a gem that's hidden,
right.
and certain people will actually find it and enjoy it, and so on and so forth. But I think on the overall scheme of things, it might actually be a little bit forgotten. just because of how it's set up and everything. And maybe that build up they did before it was released got it an initial amount of attention that maybe it should have got.
Mhm.
But I think honestly, ones like Midsummer or other films like that got more of a shock draw than this
Right.
might have, and got them more of attention. So those will be actually highlighted more than the one we're specifically talking about.
That makes sense. I mean, I would definitely agree that the the kind of almost like a spiritual sequel to Hereditary was Midsummer, and it it feels like even though personally I do like Midsummer a little bit more, I would say that Hereditary has more um, actual horrific imagery, where I would say Midsummer has like very striking imagery. I think
Yes.
Hereditary definitely is more horrific in the scene with Charlie and that telephone pole, or the scene where the husband just spontaneously combusts into flames, uh,
Yeah.
or even or even the scene where Tony Collette's character is walking, kind of like crawling along like the ceiling and everything.
Walls and hot, and like missing his vision at every point. As soon as he
Mhm.
turns, he just kind of crawls to the right and everything.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's a, I don't know actually. That is a really interesting idea that, especially because it's a movie that in the last 4 years or so, the fact that this movie came out 4 years ago is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that this movie has been talked about to death, and I think also with Ari Aster is supposed to be releasing a new movie this year with Joaquin Phoenix, and so I do think that and I do think that this third movie will kind of a lot of times I think the third movie makes or breaks um
Fair
where
enough.
so like I think that if this third movie does good or does well, then I think fans are gonna go back and rewatch Hereditary, and maybe it'll be more regarded as a classic. I do think it will be regarded as a cult classic in sort of
Fair enough.
sort of in a
Right
way
groups.
like I don't think it'll be like Donnie Darko level, but I think it'll be um I'm trying to think of what like like
A good person, I think, would be like maybe Paranormal Activity, where it wasn't anything new. They
mhm,
used old ideas. So obviously, the film by camera view was a Blair Witch Project
right.
style esque like video and everything. And I think the very first one, not to count the sequels, because I didn't enjoy the sequels as much, honestly.
Yeah.
They got a little overplayed. But the very first one, I love the very first Paranormal Activity because it took an old idea and put it in a sense where maybe a few people could feel that idea. Because regardless if you live in a haunted apartment or house or not, people have their own little situations that happen that freak them out about that. So to see it film in that sense without actually showing anything, and it was more of a response video, live action films, they got like a different type of fear out of it and started a new type of
Yeah.
genre of, as you say, filming of horror films in a sense.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I take it to this Hereditary, where if you take the time to actually watch it and everything, like it's a new different type of, it kind of mixes in witchcraft, demonology, excuse me, and then like the classic, oh, I'm living in a haunted house, but it gives it a whole different vibe. Like you can't take this in the same view as any other haunted movie. Any other haunted movie, you kind of get the vibes. You're like, this is gonna happen. Okay, that happened. This is what's coming next. With
Hmm.
this one, it kept you on your toes, but it wasn't like a shock and awe at first.
Right.
The majority of the movie, it's not there to shock you. You're trying to like almost solve a mystery. You're like, what's going on the whole time? So you're getting freaked out. But you're trailing because you don't know where it's leading you. In a
Oh
sense.
yeah.
Which, like how the lady Joan, who we later discovered was a friend of the main character's mother.
Mm-hmm.
right? And she doesn't know till she finds the binders, pretty much showing pictures of them together and everything. And now she sets her up for, like, how you might say would be voodoo or witchcraft, or however which way you want to take it.
Very like occult type stuff, you know.
Yes. And then going also off of the trauma that they set up. So, like, in the sense of the Joan lady saying she lost a child. So it gives her the end to get in with the main character and be like, let me help you maybe redeem yourself or feel better, so on and so forth, the situation, while also actually at the same time setting her up.
Right.
Now, that type of thing isn't so crazy to believe, but in this movie, it sets up the basis for realistic things that you can maybe imagine, actually leading to actual things that are pretty fucking scary, which most people were like, legit, however you feel on religion or whatnot, these are the things that, regardless of how you talk about, people have an actual fear for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like even like the people who are like dead, like I'm super Christian, so on and so forth, if they feel something that might be a spirit or what they attribute as a spirit in their house, and someone
Mm-hmm.
freaking them out, it's a real scare. So movies like that, they are a little they're maybe put people at a disgruntled level because they are not familiar or safe with feeling or thinking about these type of things, because they're actually feel susceptible to maybe being an interaction with one, if you could say.
Well, I think this movie. I think deals with kind of those like haunted house or spirit kind of tropes in a really interesting way, that it shows that there are multiple kind of ways of kind of like being haunted. You see the older brother is very much haunted by like guilt, by what
Mm,
happened with his sister, and then you see the mother is very much kind of haunted, almost like in an actual like spiritual sort of way, where she keeps hearing like the clicks, and
yeah.
noticing that like shit's moved inside of her like dollhouse and things like that. um and the father is, he definitely feels haunted, but in this way of like, he wants to move forward, while the other two, while his son and his wife are constantly like almost regressing, like every day they're getting
Yes, and can I pinpoint on that? I will say, when people watching this movie, the person they will kind of ignore or not pay enough attention to is the father.
oh yeah, for
And I
sure.
think he's a key point to, if you pay attention to how he's responding or how he's interacting with everybody throughout the film, is
Hmm.
a good explanation as like a backup to, like, you can always lead on him to kind of show you what the film's actually supposed to do, even if you're seeing it on the opposite side of what he's viewing himself.
Oh
Because
yeah.
he definitely, I find him to be the middle ground, like the very logical, sensical, like if you were a normal person in this, as you're dividing through this, so you can, even if you understand as a viewer that he's not seen everything correctly,
Hmm.
you're on his side the whole time, because you're like, no, I get why he'd be, because specifically since he's a psychologist,
Oh yeah. I mean, he
and
just
that's
wants
a
his family to
crazy
be okay.
angle. Yeah, it's a crazy angle on the film to have a psychologist right there in
Hmm.
the whole middle ground, not seeing anything that the main the main character, as you will is seeing it, and also viewing her, because he is a psychologist, and that is a crazy angle a lot of films don't have,
Yeah.
along with yeah, yeah.
It's
But
very intelligent. Like his character is very intelligent, and as you said, he's very like um he's kind of like the one. He's almost like the audience's view, where he's like the normal one,
mhm.
sort of set in this world of like macabre, sort of. Um, and he's almost like almost kind of like pragmatic in sort of how he's trying to figure out all these scenarios, where like he'll go up and he'll notice that his wife is kind of like hyper fixated on the dollhouse, and he's just kind of like chilling out, like dinner or
Mm,
something.
Or I love the part where he comes in, and of course the main character is making like little models. That's her job. She's
Mhm.
making little fixatures, like I don't want to say claymations, but I'm not sure what a better term for it is. But she's making little characterizations in live art,
Mhm.
and she's actually putting her emotions out into it and making scenes from what would actually happen. And the husband comes up and he goes, "What would you think if our son saw that? Because it's the traumatic sequence of their daughter being beheaded,
Mhm.
in a sense, that was caused, as you will, by the son, maybe, or by other puppeteering events, so on and so forth, however
Yeah.
you see it." But he's like, "How would you think that would affect our child?" And the lady isn't worried about it because she's in like a hyper bipolar, as you will, fixation where she's hyper addict and she's just got to do something. So you
Mhm.
kind of see, you get two different angles of people, the son and the mother, who are going through the same experience because neither of them actually caused it, as you will find as you watch the movie.
Mhm.
But both of them are experiencing it and not understanding why it's happening, and the different things between them actually plays them against each other, which is a brilliant dynamic because you actually feel for the mother, who I actually find that the thing I love about this movie is as it goes on, you actually see the different levels of grief to this mother,
Oh yeah, for
like
sure.
the psychology level, and then again with the husband being a psychologist. Like I really felt like they delved into that in this movie of being like, we're gonna go real psychologists and find every level of things actual people go through.
Mhm.
And the hardest part of watching this movie for me as a normal person was the first time the mother was crying about Charlie dying. Where she's like screaming her guts out, and it just pans over to the son in the bedroom next to it, just eyes awake. And it's one of the most, like, honestly, it's one of those things that's so traumatic that even a normal person who maybe never experienced that situation,
Mhm.
it gut wrenches you. Where you're just sitting there, you're like, oh, like I kind of want this to pass because it's
Yeah.
too real. It's too
Yeah.
real. And I think honestly, the actress who played the mother in this movie, she did it so good. I feel like she should have been more rewarded because that
Oh,
type of thing, you got to go to a place to but like to scream like that.
they're in I well, I guess it would have been like winter 2018, 2019. There was like a campaign going around for like Oscar for Tony Collette who played the mother. Like a lot of people think that Tony Collette deserved the Oscar, and the fact that she wasn't even nominated for Best Actress was
Hmm.
a huge snub because it was like it was because it was a horror movie. Um,
Yeah, like watch any of those scenes where she's going out like that and don't have a feeling. I'll give you like $1,000. Like you know
oh,
what I'm
she's
saying? Like that
amazing.
shit, it hits you in your core, bro. Like because it makes you imagine how your mother would feel.
Oh,
It puts everybody in that zone, and it's not something you can just like slide past and be like whatever as a scene. You know what I'm saying? Like,
but I mean, her range, and I think this is another reason why um, I think this movie is going to kind of garner this cult classic kind of status. Is that regardless of if you're a fan of horror movies or not, one thing that I don't think you can take away is the acting from everyone, especially Tony Collette, where um like I think one of the best scenes in the entire movie is the dinner scene when Tony Collette basically like flips the fuck out and is like, "Don't talk to me like that. I'm your mother," and like just the
as I quote,
back and
I'll
forth.
quote it for you. She says, "How dare you look at me with that face on your face?"
Mm-hmm.
That is a direct quote.
It yeah,
As in
it's
implying you didn't
amazing.
have to say anything. I saw how you looked at me and I'm gonna respond off that. And that is a very bipolarized thing that people can attribute to a lot of different situations. And I love that scene. Thank you for
Mhm.
bringing it up.
It's such a great scene, and I think it the way that her and the son are just bouncing off of each other, and the way that he's like the guy who plays the son. I mean, after the movie, he was like, I had to get like psychological help and everything because this movie
Hmm.
like fucked me up, and I believe it because his acting. I think when he when his sister dies and it's basically his fault, and he just leaves her there for his parents to find, and he goes upstairs and just lays in his bed. And I think it's like that is such a like a human thing where I
It
think,
says you don't know where to go with it.
yeah.
Like you put yourself in those shoes immediately.
Oh yeah.
Immediately when it happens, you put yourself in those shoes and you're like, what would I do?
Yeah, like that's what I mean. Like my thought whenever I watch that is like, if I was in his position, what would I have done? Would I have woken my parents up and been like, "Hey, I accidentally just killed your daughter," or would I just be like, "I'm gonna go to sleep and I'm gonna stress over this all night"?
Yeah. And the scene where they show him awake, eyes open, and he's listening to his mother walk out the house
Mm-hmm.
to go to her car and find it and everything. It's
Mm-hmm.
it like honestly that type of traumatic thing. It's like some old dog or like whatever movie you can think of that's like very traumatic is like you're gonna leave this movie feeling like very sick in your stomach, that pit in the bottom
Oh
of
yeah.
your belly feeling and shit. And when it does that, and you also as the viewer again, you know that that happened, so you put some blame on him, but you also still realize from the get go, this whole movie has a very vibe of puppeteering.
Oh yeah.
Like, to where you don't understand and you can't say it for sure, but the whole movie, you know that these people are actually being led on a certain path
Oh yeah.
to
Um.
act out certain things. And so you feel for them in a different sense because you know it's really not their fault because they're almost set up, but you can't prove it. You don't know why yet.
Right.
So it puts you at a weird 50-50 with them.
Oh yeah. You are. I think what I love kind of about this movie is um with a lot of horror movies, especially horror movies now, the audience knows more than the characters, like
Hmm.
90% of the time. I think what I love with Hereditary is the audience knows just as much as the characters do. So the audience is figuring out these things and being twisted and turned just as much as the characters are. And I think that's what makes it so much more enjoyable, especially when it's a slow burn, is that you can't have a lot of answers or anything coming. So, when the son is having like nightmares, or when the mother is sleepwalking and she's like pouring gasoline on him and she's like about to set him on fire, and he wakes up and he's like, "What are you doing?" Like, I like those kind of scenes, I think hit so much harder in the end because of um just because of how it's the progression of it.
Honestly, I agree. And the thing I love too is that the director or whoever, the writer, whoever, whichever you give the credits to,
I think that was still
you can
Ari
say,
Aster.
yeah, okay, both people. Okay, cool. So the credits you can give to is that the whole time you could see from the son's eye that they're setting the mother up against him.
Mhm.
So obviously, as the viewer, it's not maybe not specifically the mother's fault, but from the son's point of view, it's all the mother he's got to look out for. He wakes up from a crazy dream and sees his mom in there, and he's like, "You were trying to take my head off." And at that point, she was just coming in there because she heard him freaking out in his dreams and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And honestly, it gives you a dynamic too, because the director and writer also show you certain points for the mother. Like one of the parts that freaked me out the most, she's in her room at one point and she turns the lights off and she looks back and she sees her mother, the grandma, in the room looking at her. She just
Mhm.
stares her down and they're just both staring at each other. And that part freaked the hell out of me. She's not extra scary looking. It's just the grandma, right? But like the idea of that and the fact that her dynamic with the mother, where as she already said in like therapy or a group, however you want to say that group session was or whatever,
Mhm.
like she had a very sick problem. So from her point of view as the viewer, seeing the mother right there, the grandmother, standing there staring her down, and then she turns the lights on and then she's just not there. like it automatically from the beginning of the movie puts me on the mother's side, where no matter how crazy she's acting and how you maybe not wouldn't have taken the direction the mother would, from the
Right.
get-go you're like something's going on, and you kind of feel for this mother because you're like the mother's been tormented by her grandma and is now seeing visions of her, and that I ain't gonna lie, old ladies freak me out.
Dude, old ladies are scary, man. Old white
Yeah.
women are terrifying.
They are Insidious. The whole scary part of Insidious was the old lady in the fucking black veil, white like bride outfit. You know what I'm saying?
Oh no, I just meant in general, dude. Old white women are scary. Like,
Yeah,
you
that
ever go to Walmart and see
too.
an angry old white woman? She is terrifying.
Yeah, I keep my eyes on the floor. You know.
Um, but so a little bit of background. Um, this movie. Hold on, my cat's fucking with shit. So,
That's my cat, see dog. He's right behind me.
so,
Okay.
so this movie had a budget of $10 million, which is, you know, pretty much kind of like the basis for most A24 movies. Um, its domestic box office was 44 million, so that's a that's a really good whatever it is. It's a really good box office.
It's a good profit, at least.
Yeah,
It got enough. I got enough of how you say media reference for it to make enough money for it to stand out.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I think there is a star power. This movie was also marketed really interestingly, where this movie was, I don't want to say it was mismarketed, but it
It could
was,
take maybe a different route.
yeah. Well, the trailer, which I'm probably gonna put in this video, like kind of below us or something, is it kind of plays a little bit differently. Like the trailer kind of, I think, comes off more as
It kind of
uh
leads you on.
what?
Like it kind of leads you on to a different idea of what the movie may be.
Yeah, like it kind of comes off a little bit less of a slow burn and a little bit more of like weird, like jump scares, like very
Like a natural
crazy all
horror
time.
movie. Like they can lead you along and get your regular jump scares, kind of.
Yeah. Um,
Mm.
which I think this generation, there's basically a split in horror right now between um like the like between the genre, where you have your jump scare horror movies with like essentially Blumhouse, or you have your A24, which is your slow burn. So it's like you either got like your Conjurings and stuff like that, or you have your Hereditaries. Which I think
Enough.
is great for horror, but at the same time, I think it kind of causes this sort of divide where horror fans are now kind of, or at least a lot of horror fans are very, um, like kind of like gatekeepers in the sense of,
Fair enough.
you know, um, and so I know that you're a fan of kind of both Blumhouse horror movies and A24, but
You see, I'm a fan of anxiety, like I was telling you earlier. Any
yeah,
movie that causes me general anxiety when I'm watching it, like I'm gonna be like, that was a good movie. Because to cause me actual anxiety, it's gotta be somewhat realistic in a sense.
hmm
And I will pull up two things, 2 points that I noted down in my notes. I haven't looked at them yet because we've been going good and I've been able to like think of them on my own. So I haven't been checking my notes. But two things that they did that kind of combine into one thing. So maybe it'll be one thing. But as far as this movie, they bring up a certain thing that other, say, spirit movies, ghost or demon, however you want to define it, don't do. Is when the son is doing certain things and you realize that a spiritual thing's about to happen to him, like an attack or assault. You see like a light shine and
hmm
kind of almost like it reflects off a mirror and hits the whole presence around him.
Right.
And that's a very cool thing that I liked off the bat. So I was like, that's a different sense of something that only he's noticing, so on and so forth. By itself, wasn't really that great.
Hmm.
But ev as you notice, as it kind of went on, he started seeing his reflection, say, doing a different face at him.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, oh shit. So that light he's seeing is like almost like that presence entering the room. And maybe that isn't the best reflection of how it's done, but say someone who's been in a haunted house or whatever, I feel like there's a certain, even if you haven't been actually watched a horror movie, you tone, there's a certain feeling or point that gives you the idea that something has entered in the room. And I
Oh
thought it was a very cool idea and sense of how they did it in that movie, showing like, hey, you and the main character know something's just popped up,
yeah.
something's there. And then to add on to it, that little
Oh yeah. The
in his
clicks.
ear, bro, that is like, and I'll put it towards Insidious again because I will always reference it's one of my favorite horror movies of all time.
Yeah.
That main character, that main demon with the red face, as you will, in Insidious #1 that
Hmm.
popped up, he made certain noises and had hooves, and it gave like a very African demon animal kind of vibe to it and everything. So when
Hmm.
you hear that click in this movie, you get that same kind of like animalistic vibe, not just a demon, but an animalistic demon. And for some reason, that seems scarier to me
Oh
as
yeah.
like a person viewing it.
Oh yeah. It's very like unnatural, and so it is sort of that um like I don't want to necessarily put it into like the uncanny valley, but it's it sets off I think this feeling of uneasiness because it's so unfamiliar and
Yes.
unnatural where it's like it it's literally a psychological thing where like your brain is like this isn't okay, this isn't normal. And
Yeah.
instinctually like you just want it to be gone because it's like I can't properly
Fathom it.
process this.
Yeah, because as a human growing up, you're taught about enough things that what are naturally in the world. Even if you respond to it in the same way, you know what's going on.
Hmm.
So you have like a calculated response, if you will. So when you hear these certain things that they display in movies, in like the right movie, it's something that your brain, if you're like, if I were to hear this, or this were to be happening to me, your brain actually wouldn't be able to calculate it because it's not something known.
Right.
And being able to find that in a horror movie now is a new thing because you got to put it in a certain way. Like we've seen so many things throughout so many movies, so many things that happen in the world, so on, so what.
Hmm.
But like when it comes to spiritual stuff, it hits a different tone because it's something that maybe is real, but not everybody per se will acknowledge.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
and that gives it the extra scariness because if you do believe in it and if you have seen it, it's not even something that everybody else will acknowledge with you as much.
Hmm.
And
Like,
that's where parts of this movie actually hit me, like, say, she tries to throw the book in the fire and she catches on fire. Like, that shit kind of was like, damn, like, you're in this, bitch.
mm,
like, you can't get out now. Like, you're in it. You fucked up, whatever, like, whichever part.
oh yeah. I mean, I think there's this like as you said where like when she threw the book into the fire and like she starts to like catch on fire and then um and again with like the really striking image of like when her husband catches on fire just like right in front
Yeah.
of her. Um
And she doesn't stop. She just
no,
looks at him.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's I think it's also this way of the movie is I mean the movie's gorgeous. Like it's filmed beautifully. Um and it's like I think it's this thing where even though like her husband setting on fire is very horrific, it's still a beautiful shot.
Kind of gratifying. Like he knew it was gonna happen. He was shitting on the plot the whole time. He's the like the outliner that's like, hey, it's just going on. So you're like, if this is gonna blow up, we need
Not
this
even
fucker
so
to
much
go.
and not even so much as like gratifying, but in this way of like as kind of fucked up as it is, this could literally be like a painting on my wall. Like it's beautiful, but it's so dark and horrible.
I can see that, you Da Vinci ass motherfucker.
But it's but no, I mean I just think that especially like when I look at a movie like this and I not compare it to, but I'll say Hereditary is probably one of A24's most popular horror movies. And so if I kind of hold that up against The Conjuring, which is Blumhouse's probably most popular,
They're very in the same vein, though, so
yeah, they're
it's
both
fair
sort
to
of haunted
compare them.
house movies.
Yeah.
But I will pick Hereditary every time over.
Okay. I kind of agree too, because I find that the ones you're comparing them to, like the Conjuring or whatnot, they're somewhat going off of what people think may be somewhat of a realistic tale, like of off like information that, hey, if you do believe, you do believe. You don't, you don't. So
Yeah,
on and so forth. So they're kind of allowed to follow a usual theme of a movie. So each one of them, no matter how good they are, you're kind of like you can kind of follow it. Like it's nothing shocking you. Which
right,
again, I hate to be the sore subject of bringing up Insidious, but Insidious was like a this is something y'all haven't thought about. It
right.
was a retake on what you could say is a Freddy Krueger horror movie.
Hmm.
Because the only other movie in your dreams you got to be worried about is Freddy Krueger. There's never another movie you can think of like that. So it kind of brings you a different sense. Whereas when you go with The Conjuring, you're like, I'm going off of it's still a haunted movie. It's still a ghost. They still end up hitting certain themes how you will and whatnot, so on and so forth. So even though they're good and I don't hate on them, I still find them as just new age versions of old movies in a sense.
Yeah, like I think when I sort of again I hate to say compare because it's not necessarily comparing, but when I sort of pit The Conjuring against Hereditary, I think of The Conjuring is based on real events, but Hereditary actually feels like a real story, you know.
Yes, I agree.
Um like Hereditary is so much more human and is so much more of a character study of this family that is dealing with something horrific than the Warrens going to, you know, this haunted house with, some creepy shit. And um honestly, I fucking hate the ending of the Conjuring movies. I'm gonna just hate them. I think it's just a lot of loud shit moving around and people
Yeah.
screaming. That's all it is.
Hey, and I'll tell you the way where they fucked up was this. I'll tell you this. It doesn't matter what idea you have behind the movie, when you rely on children to be the ones seeing the horror aspects, the ghosts acting up, so on and so forth, and the disgruntled single mother is the one being like, "Hey, you're just being children, and y'all need to relax," and blah 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 blah. Like the whole theme has been so played out through so many things that no matter how good or bad you do it, it's just a familiar plot, and it's not. It doesn't give you the same type of fear because you know how it's going. You know the mother is just looking over the children actually seeing real things. Like
Yeah.
say like in The Conjuring where the kid had that rotating toy that showed like well I would describe as a Slender Man. You know,
In The Conjuring 2 with the
yes,
Crooked Man. That's his name. Yeah.
Crooked Man. Sorry, excuse me. Yes, the Crooked Man. It was a good aspect because visually that was disturbing to see, and you would freak out. But the whole idea of it only being the kid seeing it, not the parent and everything, is so played out.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It's just a new age version of it. So it's still a good movie. I don't take anything away from it, but it doesn't like draw a new thinking idea like how say this Hereditary is, where again how I say from the get go, you can sense it's a puppeteering.
Yeah.
Like something's being drawn a line, and you're just visually witnessing. You're the witness to what's going on, kind of in a
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like I don't want to make it seem that like I hate the Conjuring movies because I mean, I think the Conjuring movies are fun.
Yeah,
Like
fair enough.
they're fun to watch.
Get your girlfriend over and watch The Conjuring. I'm
Yeah,
down for it.
they
You
are
know what I'm
very
saying?
much date movies.
Yeah.
But it's like I think when if I'm in the mood for just a really good movie that is very disturbing, it's Hereditary. Um, and I think that's what I guess leads me to my next question is what do you think it is about Hereditary that don't people won't attach to? Like, is it just because of how slow it is that you think people don't that like a handful of people don't like this movie?
Honestly, that could be a good point to it. But I'll put it to it this way: is I think that when it comes to horror movies, that the casual viewer who's not like a specific horror fan or so likes the quick shock and awe
Like The
in a
Conjuring?
sense. Yeah, like even The Conjuring, they could be like, okay, I'm getting set up like a casual horror movie. So even if they're not into horror movies, they're entertained, how you will say, like every 10, 15 minutes
Right.
throughout the movie. There's like a timeline that they can get stuck onto in a sense. Whereas with this movie, if you're not a fan or someone who looks for the specific thing and
Hmm.
you're just a casual viewer, you might zone out at the wrong times, as you will, and miss the points that'll actually draw you to the next situation. Because I find in a rewatch of this movie that it's not even just foreshadowers in general; they foreshadow scene to scene.
Oh yeah.
Like there are certain things that they'll do that I might catch on the second or third time watching it that is immediately satisfied within the next scene that you might like aren't supposed to notice the first time watching it. And if somebody doesn't catch it the first few times, they're not entertained enough.
Hmm.
However much the ending is gratifying, they might not go back. And if someone explains to them those little things they missed, they just might not care. But I feel like it is definitely for a specific fan, this movie.
Well, so do you think then that like if 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 say someone watches this movie and they don't like it,
Mm.
they're just not going to rewatch it. They're not going to give it that second chance. I'm under the impression that I think every movie deserves at least 2 to 3 watches for you to
Mm.
officially make up an opinion on it. Um,
I mean, I agree with that same sense. There hasn't been like honestly, if a movie is good enough for you to watch it from front to finish, it deserves a second watch, and I
mhm.
believe that. Now, there's been a few movies I just didn't finish. In that case, you'd have to argue me into the sense of rewatching it in a sense. But if you get to the point of finishing it and getting an okay vibe about it, then I would agree you should rewatch it a second time.
Mhm.
But again, as I say, there's certain people who aren't maybe specifically great horror fans, as you will, or maybe not even horror fans, but into like a specific plot that they care enough to rewatch several times. They got too much time on their hands. They got to do further things, so on and so forth.
Right.
So, I mean, those people I think are the ones who might miss out on this movie, where because they're like, whatever. You know what I'm saying? They're like, I try to watch it one time, whatever. Is my girl trying to get me to watch it? I'm into it, whatever. Like those type of people, yeah, I think we'll miss out on this movie. But I think the people who pay attention, give it a second chance, it might come down as a classic.
Yeah. I mean, I really think all movies deserve at least a second chance. Like, 'cause I will say, the first time I watched *Midsummer*, I didn't like it. I thought it was so boring.
That is a bro.
I
That
was,
is a weird one to watch. It
yeah,
hits your senses in a weird way, for
yeah.
sure.
Like the first time I watched it, I was like, "This movie is so boring. I don't like it." And then the second time I watched it, I was like, "Wait, no, this movie's incredible." And then I've seen it so many times since then. Um, and Hereditary is another one that the first time I saw it, I liked it, but I liked it more because it was one, the acting was incredible, and two, like as I said, some of the imagery just in it was insane.
Hey,
Like,
hey, can I ask you a quick question? Is there a way to pause this really quick?
yes.
Okay, I gotta hit the bathroom so bad. Can I please pause this real quick? Please, please, I'm dying. I'm dying.
We're back. So I'm not really actually too sure what else to say about this movie. This, so you think that, I mean, do you think this movie is maybe not going to be considered a classic, but do you think this movie is going to be at least re-looked at in the future, where say people who weren't fans of it might give it another chance, say after this new movie that he's making with Joaquin Phoenix?
Well, to add on to what he said, right? He's right. He said, "Fuck that." All right. No, look. Honestly, the way I put it, hey, look at that little fucker. Look at him. I love him. Hold on. All right. Oh. What's
Welcome to
up?
Cat
What's
Cast.
up? Yeah, what's up? What's up? We're flexing cats. All right, so look, I'll put it this way: if you're at least attentive enough, you don't have to be a fan, but you watch the whole movie. I
Mhm.
think the end is so gratifying how it sums up so many things at once. They give you so many little Easter eggs throughout the movie that you might not pay attention to, but at the end, you're like, you kind of almost are forced to look back upon because you're like, okay, I understand now in a sense. When you end up seeing the dead grandma with their head cut off, and the mom who saw her own head off, both bowing down to Paimon, I think the name was, the one that the mom found in the binders earlier, saying was the god of mischief and everything. You
Right,
just get the collective sense of, I understand everything. Because everything that was fucking with the family the whole time was kind of just like a ha ha ha, I know how to fuck with you. Go fuck yourself type shit.
right,
Kind of
yeah,
like how the mom started talking in Charlie's voice. It wasn't Charlie. It was the Pion, the god of mischief, fucking with him.
yeah.
And the son was like, I don't like this. I don't like this. Can we stop? Because he's the one who technically beheaded his sister.
Hmm.
And it was the mischief in that sense. And it was like a dynamic they played on the fucking father who was a psychologist that
Hmm.
really ran it the whole time. And I honestly just think, besides the whole movie, the dynamic that was thought of between the father, the mother, and the son, and the grandmother, I guess you can add in, was a real smart and genius play on things that people will only understand and respect if they actually pay attention the whole time. And that's my view on it.
Well, I think honestly, with that, I think that might be partially the reason why people won't, why maybe some might not consider it a classic, um, or maybe just a reason why some may not revisit it is because it is a movie that you have to pay very close attention to. Um,
Mm.
where there's a lot of horror movies where you can kind of, there's usually a handful of scenes where you can pull out your phone and go on Facebook or Instagram for a couple of minutes and then turn it off and then look back up on the screen and you really haven't missed anything.
Mm.
This Hereditary is a movie where you do have to pay very close attention.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it honestly took me a few watches to understand and respect it myself, in
Hmm.
a sense. Yeah, honestly, I will say maybe the people who are casually watching it will be put off by how great of a performance the actress who played the mother, actually put on.
Right.
Because she is
That's what I
so,
hope.
because she's so good at showing like a bipolar reaction in every different scene that I think people who like aren't viewing it for that sense are almost put off in that sense by her. And it's like against them because they're not viewing a good movie and everything. But that's kind of what I think actually kind of helps tie in and what makes it such a good movie and what she did as a good actress by performing that in a sense.
Oh
And
yeah, she's
it
incredible.
like it's one of those movies that honestly, if you care to go back and tie the pieces together, it would be a good movie for it. But if you're not one of those type of people and you just want to get it all the first time you watch it, then yeah, you might be kind of put off by it. And that's kind of how I end up viewing it at the end of the day.
Right. So,
Mm.
so I guess with that, at the end of it, I think this movie is going to be considered a cult classic. You
Mm.
said that you want it to be considered a cult classic, but you don't think it will be.
Yes, sir. Yep, I would say that's perfectly correct.
So I guess that is probably going to be the end of the episode. Is there anything that you want to say before I wrap this all up?
I just want to say thanks for bringing me up here. It's cool talking to you about it. It's a movie I do love, and I hope maybe this actually draws different people I've never met to actually watch it some of the day and give their opinion on it. And if not, that's okay. But thank you for letting me talk about it for a little bit.
Hell yeah, man! It has been so awesome to talk to you again. I miss you. I hope that I see you this summer. Hopefully, I'm coming down this summer. We'll see.
Please, sir.
But for anyone watching, thank you guys so much. My name's Mark, and this has been Will It Be a Classic? Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, follow us on Twitter. We have the Talking Schlock connection with Chris and Corey that comes out. We got the Film Section Podcast Season 2 coming out very soon. And next week, I got something else for this episode coming. Thanks again, Tyler, so much. This has been so awesome. And see
Thank
you guys
you.
next time.